Welcome to Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia on WCGA 1100 AM, where we do speak the truth in love based on Ephesians 4:15. In today's woke PC culture, there are many forces that want to stop free speech, especially for people of faith. Good men and women must be willing to stand up for their faith and be the salt and light to preserve our freedom. True freedom comes from faith in Jesus Christ. And John 8:32, God's word says, the truth will set you free. Today, I'd like to welcome you friends. I'd like to welcome good friends, Victoria Scott. Good to have you here, Victoria.
An absolute pleasure.
And of course, Murray Edwards. Great to have you here, Murray.
Happy to be here.
All right, so I'm encouraged to be with these fine Americans. We are developing a product called the TNS Studios, if you will, the Newscaster Studio. And basically what we're trying to do there is develop a platform that can get us the news that we need to hear, the opinions and commentary that's not available otherwise. And so it's a way for a lot of conservative media to get out there. And we have situations today where the mainstream media, if you will, is not necessarily projecting all the news out there. And so we felt like there was a real need for this. And God brought us together. Victoria from the L.A. area, from Long Beach, and then with Murray from Alabama, of all places, and they all have incredible skill sets. And we're under the leadership of Victoria for this company, as she's our CEO and president, and helping us develop this company. And then, of course, Murray's doing a lot of great things on the technology side. And it's amazing just how y'all, when you have a vision for something, how God will bring the right people together. And it's a unique group of people because you would say, how could he do this? But all of a sudden he did, and we had a long road to get where we are. It wasn't necessarily our plan, but God led us in this direction. So the Newscaster Studio is out there. There's an app that you can download, just like WCGA has an app you can download. And there are ways we can communicate programs that are just incredible, that give you an alternative news commentary and, like I said, other vision opinions that will really transform your lives. Because again, so many in the mainstream are just putting up barriers to that type of news. So Victoria, tell us about how you got here.
Well, I started in about 2004 when I am from New York, and when the towers fell, I watched it live. And I remember my dad taking me up to the Windows of the World restaurant up there, and I was very, very, very affected by 9/11. And also, my daughter's father, my other half, who's been gone for 9 years, he served in the military. He was special forces for the Navy and the Army, one of the few Americans to serve in both. And he had an incredible insight. And there was something going on because at the time our daughter was only 3 years old. And as I started watching, 9/11 pointed out a unity. Okay, it brought a lot together. But there was also a part of me, and Lawrence actually brought it about, was that the unity, we really weren't, they would say we woke up the sleeping giant. But there was a feeling that we really didn't. That it was the moment and we tried, but we just weren't looking at the root causes and what was going on. We were looking at the situation and what we can do to get through it, but we weren't looking at the causes. And what brought me to this point is the word unity, which I'm very happy to hear that it is being used today a lot more than I've ever known. But that's what I felt this company was built on, because I have a 27-year-old daughter and I own a hair salon. And I do children. I have middle school, high school, college, all in my chair from the time they started school to the time they get married, and then they have children. 30 years I've owned it. What I began to watch was that there was a generation of people that only had one side of the American story. And that's when I realized what the problem was. The problem was, like you said, mainstream media and its bias or whatever. But it became very obvious to me that there was a generation growing up not knowing real information, just giving certain things, wokeism or words or clothing or genderism, anything to take them from understanding the foundation of what we are about as Americans first. You have to understand who we are and the great opportunities we have in order to live the American dream. So, what happened is I began to realize that there were many, many voices out there not being heard. We are a generation here ourselves with a lot of experience. And the unity and the experience with good, strong, solid voices that really wanted something to say was the foundation that I saw all that time ago. And actually, when you were on my show and Murray was on my show, I had no idea. But I did know that each of you played a significant role as to whatever was going to come about. And who would believe that you and I are both sitting here on Clint's show? So the idea about this to me is to unite strong American voices that have the experience not only as to where we are today, but the experience as to how we got here. And if we start explaining and if we stand in the truth of who and what we are about, that's the way we're going to win the next generation, because they only have one side. So if we bring another side and speak in truth and love, I think we can make a lot more headway, and that's the way to unite, whereas what we're watching in our streets across this country being divided.
Man, that's very good. And how about you, Murray? What brought you to the Newscaster studio and this vision? Because you were very involved with even naming it because of your own experience and all the different things we were going through the process.
It was a lot of different things. I've always been involved in politics for quite a long time. I grew up in the capital city of Alabama, which is Montgomery, which is the capital city, and been involved in local and state and federal, politics. And the problem that people see or hear is they don't get necessarily the whole truth when you sit down and you talk to someone. They look past you and not look you in the eye. And when you start to confront folks, typically you don't necessarily get the answer that you need to get. So I started doing a show a while back and trying to bring that attention to, don't tell me what you want me to hear, tell me what I need to hear. And it's just expanded from there. And of course, with my connection with Victoria on some past issues, we developed what we thought was a process in which we could bring podcasters, newscasters, freelancers together to discuss things that aren't being discussed, because we have a federal bureaucratic nightmare that is being gaslit by the media. And so we're not hearing what we need to hear. And there's got to be a group of individuals who can speak what needs to be spoken to. And instead of trying to put a spin to it, you may not necessarily agree with what is being told, but at least what you're getting are the facts and the figures. And you can then make up your mind as to whether, yes, we've been lied to for quite a long time. So that's what we've worked toward, is bringing individuals from across the country that have expertise in different areas, whether it's politics, whether it's education, whether it's a bunch of different sources, and to make sure that when they come to our platform, that they're going to hear what they need to hear.
Right.
Honest,
right,
frank conversations.
And you mentioned gaslighting of the political left, if you will, the lie that Joe Biden is perfectly healthy, can do a great job. They set him up to defeat him. They've never had debates prior to conventions, and they had one so they could get rid of him, and then they figured out who they were going to replace him with a system that was totally undemocratic. And yet they're the ones that want to call, the Republicans a threat to democracy, especially Trump. And yet the very things they've done are the very things they've accused Trump of that he's never done. And fighting for election integrity, which they did the last election in 2016, now in 2020, all of a sudden it's not acceptable. No. And so, again, they're trying to claim the same thing. But I think about that gaslighting, how often we're convinced we can see it with our eyes, what is going on, and they try to tell us what we're seeing is not reality. And it's an amazing thing that we see. And I'm not saying either side. Either side can do the same thing.
Absolutely.
We can have our own propaganda, so I don't want to make it only a left thing. It can be a right thing, too. But the bottom line of what we're seeing and how, they don't even elect Kamala, but yet that's the anointed one by the super delegates. And those 14 million people that voted for Joe Biden that didn't have somebody else, all of a sudden they're dictating who's going to be their leader. And so that's the very thing they're accusing again Trump of, they've done. So how about it? What do you think about that, Victoria?
Well, my concern is, what did they, in the Constitution, what have they circumvented to put her in there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a system, and I don't know. I have a feeling that this country is not going to accept just what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was earned. Truthfully, on my personal opinion, I don't think she's the right person for the job.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my own personal
Mm-hmm.
opinion. But I worry about the corners that we continually keep cutting, and how we keep shredding parts of the Constitution. That's probably what worries me the most, because if we do lose the Constitution, what does America will have nothing.
That's exactly right. But of course, party rules dictate how they elect their leadership. But again, they violated their own party rules
Absolutely.
by doing what they're doing. So we don't like our rules. We change the rules, and we get big name people, saying certain endorsements happen, then certain ones are held back, and the next thing you know, they've anointed someone to be their leader. And I've even heard it, even in Michigan when I was there recently, a person that's more or less a union person, he did not like the way that had been handled. Historically, he voted Democrat, and I assume he still will. I don't really know. But from his union perspective, he always felt like the Democrats did better for them. And the reality is, though, where he's facing, he's having to face that decision. Do I really want to support someone that ramrods someone through like that to get them to be the leader?
True.
And he's asking that question. So we're going to take a quick break. This is Clint Day from St. Simons Island, Georgia on WCGA. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Speak Truth and Love with Clint Day from St. Simons Island, Georgia on WCGA 1100 AM. I want to encourage you all to get the app of WCGA. It's a great app. It's available out there. And I want to also encourage you to get the Newscaster Studio, TNS, on your favorite app store. Download that, and you will have all sorts of content, amazing type content. Speaking of content, tell us about some of the content that's out there, Victoria.
We have quite an array of different things. We've got George Rodriguez right down on the Texas border.
Yep.
And he's got his hands full, let's face it. But his reporting is incredible. We have Alabama. Your new show is actually really on the top of the list right now.
It's did quite well the first couple of episodes.
And everybody, excuse me, I do my show, which is called Victoria's Voice, Grit and Grace. And it's really interesting because I cannot believe the wonderful guests that I have been blessed with. Mm-hmm. And most of it in COVID, what happened during COVID is I was blessed with meeting a man from Georgia that literally changed everything for me. He's 87 years old, Mr. Joe McCutcheon, and
amazing man.
I couldn't understand what I had in common with this man, and
entrepreneurial.
And that's what it was. And he loved that everybody. He would call me 5 a.m, 4 a.m, because 3 hours difference in California. So he's like, "Do you got a pen?" And I would never say no. I'd jump up, "Yes, Joe, give me a number," and he kept giving me these numbers to people that, like, how would I ever get this? How would I ever get this number to have these guests on my show? But it was right, because Georgia had such a strong political voice. And that's when Youngkin and the governor and all of that was starting to come about. And I had a wonderful opportunity. And every time Joe thought there was somebody that I could interview, he was like, "Take this number right now, and you're going to call them right now. I already told them that you're calling." And it's been an interesting journey. I do it. I think I've learned, and I've come to learn, though I love doing my radio show. I've had a vision for years about my show, Grit and Grace, but there's another journey I haven't ventured into yet off of my show, so that's for another time. But I've learned that my job with this company is to put out a good show, but my job is to get, I don't know, maybe 200,000 people to do what I do.
Absolutely.
That's my
Get
job.
more and more people. Get more good news out there.
That's my job.
Yeah. So, Murray, what are some other programs that we have out there? I know clothing type things, music,
We've got
faith-based.
we've got a multitude of different subject matters or subject experts. We have someone that talks about the retail industry, how fashion has changed, how AI is changing things in the fashion world. We've got a couple of folks who put politics, but they put a political spin to it that's funny. You know, that sort of makes you laugh to say, I did not really realize that this was going on, but you helped me realize it. And again, of course, we've got folks who really get down into the nuts and bolts, I guess, of what's going on. I've got two shows. I've got one that talks about everything that occurs in Washington and how it affects you and your state on a day-to-day basis. So every regulation they pass, every law they pass, it affects you. It affects you on a day-to-day basis. If you're a businessman, it affects you in a business standpoint. So we've got a large spectrum of people who talk about things that are going on in the border, from the West Coast to the East Coast, from the North to the South.
China.
International experts who talk about things, people who just have conversations with some of their local talent or their local politicians, so we can expand their footprint. The nice thing is about it, they may be local, regional, or national. When you're a local person and now all of a sudden you've got a national footprint on what you're talking about. So I'll use Alabama as a prime example. There's people from Alabama all over the country, but they can find out what's going on in their part of the world that they did not hear or could not hear. So the goal is to get as many local, regional people together and let us put that information out, share it across all the platforms that need to be shared to. And then there's people that, maybe come from a state that they're longing to get information about what's going on in their territory or where they used to live. And that's what we're providing to them.
Right. And I think, Victoria, one thing you shared with me many times was for such a time as this. I mean, Queen Esther got risen at the right time, the right place,
Right.
timing of God, and we want to be totally dependent on Him for where we're taking this vision. Would you comment on that with just the timing?
Yeah, well, actually, it's very interesting. Timing is really important because the world is very impatient. We've been spoiled by instant gratification. We have a generation that doesn't know. I mean, my daughter literally laughed at me when I told her, no, honey, you had to get up and change the channel. And no, honey, we didn't have, you had to wait
We
for
were
the
the channel
water to
changers for our
boil. You
parents.
didn't have a microwave to boil it. But, I truly believed when I started on this journey, and believe me, I've been on this journey since 2004, which is an incredible amount of time as I look back now that I have spent creating to be able to sit right here. But in that, I've also learned patience. And though we want to fight back really fast right now, I truly believe that if we keep bringing the truth on all different levels, we will have a truth-based foundation. And that is what I think in the future is what is going to get people. And you really struck a bell with me today in our meeting, how important hashtags are. And I had a real big ding ding, and now I'm going to do something with that. But I've been in my salon 30 years, and there was no Twitter or anything. Okay, so when Twitter, my clients are like, "Oh, have you heard of this new thing?" and MySpace and Twitter, and I was like, "No." So I jumped on, and I took the hashtag Long Beach Salon, which has been an incredible tool. Because in California, I'm coming to California, just Long Beach Salon, and I would come up. So that what you were saying as far as the difference that the hashtags, it reminded me of very early on in social media networking, how much it played a role.
Absolutely.
And I just think at this point, to open it up to as many voices as we can. And I truly believe you said it, speaking truth in love. I mean,
Amen.
that's what it's about.
That's what we want to be about. And again, I think about, somebody says, well, how would a person that has a salon for 30 years? I mean, I know very few people today that have a 30-year career. much less stay with one business. That entrepreneurial side of you, and then getting into the technology side for the 20 years you've been involved. So help us understand, help our audience understand how that helped you become where you are right now, and in the dual role, but mainly, obviously you have dual role.
It was crazy.
Yes.
It was really crazy, and I'll share really because, as Lawrence had contracted cancer, and he said to me, he's not, and our daughter at the time was only 18. She hadn't even been it. She was 17, and I just remember taking the dog for a walk, devastated, like, what am I going to do? And my spirit and father just kept saying, the internet, the internet, and I'm like, I don't know the internet. But I did take a really deep breath and I dried my tears and I sat down. And to tell you the truth, I went through college during COVID. I still don't even know how I found my high school transcripts. Everything I did was just led by the Spirit. Everything. And that's why today I think I can sit and say, we've laid the foundation and he'll keep laying it. And that's what I go on.
Absolutely. And you don't want to get ahead of God. I think anytime
Right.
that we're trying to do what God wants us to do, our nature is to get it done yesterday. And there are times when you just got to wait for him to act.
Right.
We want to do it. We want to get go, go, go. But I've made so many mistakes by running ahead of God. And I want to encourage anybody out there, if you have a dream or a vision that God has given you, be willing to stick to it, persevere through it. And sometimes he'll just bring something to you without even necessarily planning it that way.
Right.
Again, this team, who would have put us together, right? Georgia, Alabama, and L.A., Los Angeles, literally. But we're going to take another quick break. This is Clint Day with St. Simon's Island, WCGA. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Speak Truth and Love. Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia on WCGA. I'm here today with Victoria and Murray. And help us understand, what's the process of developing a studio? YouTube maybe call it channels. We call it studio. You can develop your own podcast, have your own studio within the Newscaster studio, and we can get all your information. You can post it with us and get it out there. So tell us how that works.
It's an incredible what Murray's done as the business developer for our company. I mean, you literally have made it quite easy. You worked with our engineers, and the process is very simple for somebody to have a channel. As you go on, we have actually there is a link, right?
Yep.
And you made it pretty simple. So explain how
you
simple
go
and
to
what
our
you do.
go to our home site, which is the newscasters.com. There is an S at the end of news, and you'll see an application link if you so desire to have an interest in joining us. You fill out our application. What do you want to talk about? What you call your podcast? Do you have an inventory of shows that you would like to put forward? Now, the nice thing that we allow folks to do is we don't put any deadlines on anyone, so you can do a show as you see fit. If you don't want to necessarily do a podcast, if you want to write an article, we allow freelancers to come in and write articles. We'll put the audio to that article for you, so you don't have to worry about doing that. And if you're doing video, all we need is the video stream information. So from your studio, which what we do is once you're set up, every show, every studio is pushed out to the general public through all the social media platforms. And, so we do something that some platforms don't do. Yes, you can sign up for this organization or that organization, but you're pretty much on your own trying to get your information out. And we sort of step in. It's a two-way street. We promote your shows. You help us promote the platform. So we're helping each other out, and we're able to expand your footprint, any person's footprint that wants to get their information out to the general public. So it's worked quite nicely for us. We actually went in full production back in January of this year, and we've grown. We'll probably never be the largest, but that's not necessarily the right thing. What we want, well, what we want.
He's got a different idea.
Well, what we have to take a look at is the information is being shared, and that the right people and the right personalities are putting that information out. We're not an organization that if you like to yell and scream and holler and shout about different things, that's not us. But if you want to sit down and you want to talk about what's going on in the school systems around the country, what's going on in your local governments and things. Have local officials sit down that you can talk to them and have one-on-one conversations that is not occurring. The nice thing is when you see national TV, you see 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute sound bites. We give you the voice to talk. If it's 5 minutes, fine. If you need to talk to someone for 30 minutes, you can talk to them for 30 minutes. So there's no necessarily a deadline. And the nice thing is by doing that, we expand the overall knowledge and the concepts of what we're trying to get across to the people across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if you have a burning desire to get a message out there, you're an expert on some type of thing about teaching or whatever your desire is, literally you can use an iPhone or a Android to develop a program.
Yep.
Literally just set up on a little stand and start talking and allow your message to get out there. And again, we're building quality here. We want to make sure the quality is there. And I'm amazed though, everybody has a message, everybody has a story, and it's so important. If you're having that desire, we want to encourage you to build that platform and use the Newscaster studio to help get your message out there.
Absolutely.
It is a platform that doesn't cost you a lot of money, and it's a way that you can get a message out that the average person may not hear otherwise.
That's
And
true.
we also have it. Look at it from this standpoint. So now, if you have an issue, which we have many different issues, we can isolate. My whole thing is I've always seen one of the channels that after talking to Mark Meckler, president of Parler, after he was on my show, and I said to him, I said, Mark, what is the one thing you want to tell my audience? And he, if you remember, he had Parler and the government shut him down. Today, Convention of States. So when I had him on, he said, Victoria, the easiest election to win is school board. He goes, tell your parents, have they had enough of watching their children in their bedroom? He said, take back your school boards. Right away, I thought about it. How interesting would it be to have a channel, Take Back Your School Board, for people throughout this country, parents throughout this country can talk about what different school boards are doing. You can talk about, a Michigan school can have a problem, and yet somebody in California can relate. Do you know what I'm saying? And
Sure.
the same thing, too, you have the same thing with the January 6th. Right? So that's the difference, is that we offer a real individualized structural program that information can really be brought to the top.
That's very good. And I think about those issues, people. We need people to get involved. And if you can't get involved doing your own thing, then support someone that is working for the cause that you do believe in, because we do need to take this country back. And I just think about what happened with Trump recently and being shot, and the left trying to say, well, he got a glass fragment or whatever, and he didn't really get shot. But yet that now even Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, is saying he got shot with a real bullet. If it had been an inch away, it would have taken his life. That is a fact. It's not something to be laughed about or joked about. But the thing that he stood up and said is, we know it is a classic. There's no way you could have planned that. Fight, fight, fight.
Yep.
And we had better fight for our country. We as Christians, a lot of times, we let the other side get away with certain things. We don't fight about things. And again, I don't want to fight in a mean way, in a negative way, but I want to say fight for what is right.
Knowledge
Because
is-
if we don't, that freedom will be taken away. And if we don't think freedom can be taken away, look at the people of Cuba, look at the people of Venezuela, look at the people around us in Russia, wherever, China. Of course, China's really never had freedom. They've always been ruled by dictators. But the bottom line is we can't kid ourselves that a dictator couldn't take over this country. And a lot of people try to say, well, Trump's that dictator. No, he's not.
No.
I really don't believe that. But I also would say this. I don't believe the American people will allow that to happen. I hope we have enough fight to not let anybody do that type of thing.
I agree.
And I really do believe he's proven in his past election what he wants to do. And I really feel like a lot of his programs were to benefit the average American. You look at a lot of Democrat-run cities, they're not in a good place.
No.
Democrat-run states are not in a good place. Freedom is being eroded in those states.
Right.
And even Musk recently moved a headquarters out of California to Texas because of things they're trying to take away from the rights of a parent. So we're going to take another quick break. This is Clint Day from St. Simon's. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Speak Truth and Love with Clint Day from WCGA 1100 AM. I'm here today with Murray and Victoria from the Newscaster studio. And we have a lot of people very concerned about this upcoming election. We saw what the Democrats did with their anointed leader they're trying to put in place with Kamala. What happens if Trump doesn't win, for example?
Well, let's ask the first question. Have we changed anything on the election, on voting? Have we changed anything? Has any state changed? Are we getting voter ID? What are we doing? We watched what happened. In that time, knowing there was another significant election coming, what have we done to prevent from the same thing happening?
Well, we know the House passed a bill that requires voter ID, the U.S. House, but the Senate wouldn't pass it and the president wouldn't sign it.
Well, what
so at
happened?
least they tried.
Well, what happened is they did pass called the SAVE Act,
Right.
and they did pass it, and they passed it with the help of 5 Democrats.
Right.
All the other ones decided not to.
Right, I understand.
And once it got to the Senate side, Schumer just sort of sat on it.
Right.
And he did that with immigration and several other different things. But with the political machines that we have in place right now, I think everybody understands that the reason they had that debate when they had it was they knew. We didn't have to be told.
Right.
They knew what was going on in the background.
Right.
And that it would be totally, completely exposed. That would give the media enough time to do what they needed to do to push him out. The sad thing about it is so many on the Democratic side of the aisle really don't understand that they just had a defeat of democracy in that own right, because no one voted for Kamala. She's not received the first delegate. Now she's going to get them now, but she also hadn't raised any money. Everybody was excited about, well, she's done $200 million in donations. Well, they don't understand that all the party elites basically said, if Biden's candidate, we're not going to give you any money. So once he left, or I won't say he left, once they sort of pushed him to the side, all that money started to free up and started to come into the party.
Yeah, well, Murray, you have great insights, though. What happens? What's the difference between a Trump election and a Kamala election?
I think what people will see, if it's a Trump election, the tearing down of the bureaucratic state. There's 457 bureaucratic agencies now in the country. They are the 4th state. We have 3 branches. They are now the 4th branch of the government, and they have no one to hold them accountable. Now, the Supreme Court did come in and rule on the Chevron case, which is want to back off some of the power and the regulations that they have. But I believe that what will occur, and you've heard some terms out there that they're going to rip things apart. Well, in all sincerity, the United States government's got 23 some odd million employees. They are the number 1 employer for the last 6 months. It's not commercial. It's not manufacturing. It is
job creation.
It is the federal governments. So they're growing, substantially.
And they tend to vote Democrat, obviously.
Correct. So if it's a Trump candidate, that if Trump should win, I think we'll see a restructuring of the bureaucratic state. I think power to the states. We've had, when you start talking about the 10th Amendment, what is not handled by the federal government should be handled by the state agencies. That's been stripped away. Now, some of the states are starting to come back and push for, give us the power, it's ours. The educational department, they've done some really bizarre things since they've been founded. It needs to come back down to the states. Now, if you're talking about a Democratic win, I think we're looking at all-out socialism, because we're almost there now. Because when the federal government comes in and tells you as an individual that you can and can't do certain things, that is socialism. That is Marxism. What they did was a coup. I mean, the powers to be came in and basically said, Mr. Biden, go away. 14 million people didn't have any say-so.
They voted for you.
They voted for him, and it doesn't matter. So what you're going to see is a spreading out of where Trump would shrink that bureaucratic state and those controls. A Democratic state will expand that. There'll be more emphasis on making sure that you as an individual can't do certain things. You as a state can't do certain things. So it's going to be it's one way or the other. I mean, we're right there. We've seen them destroy bits and pieces of the Constitution over the last 10 or 15 years. They use it when they think it's to their advantage, but they don't use it when the way it's supposed to be.
And they want to take us toward a globalist economy.
There's no
they
doubt
They
about
want
it.
to make us globalist authority,
There's no two
giving the
ifs and buts.
WHO the right to tell us about our health care.
Yes, sir.
That's just one of many examples. And people need to be aware. I mean, that's a big deal if you're going to give a non-elected group of people with the organizations that we don't support for sure from New York or wherever they're from, to give that kind of authority. We don't want to do that. We don't want to give up our freedom.
Yeah.
And I think again we've got to be aware of that. And
Yes, sir.
it's not hypothetical. It's not.
No.
It's not. It's truly what they're trying to do.
This is
The World Economic Forum. These guys are organized. They have a plan. We know in the Word of God it says they're going to be a one world government. Hopefully we'll be out of here as Christians when that happens. But that is a reality of where they're taking it, and we see it every day. The economics, the currency. The taking away of the petrodollar for the United States,
Yep.
and then trying to make that weaken us by making that happen.
Yep.
And we have not won a war in a long time, and it's time that we got to stand up and fight for what is right.
remember fundamental transformation.
Amen. We're going to take a quick break. This is Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia, on WCGA. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Speak Truth and Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia, on WCGA 1100 AM. I'm here today with Victoria Murray. And that is a big question. What would happen? Will there be some type of civil war, incredibly divided situation? We talked about unity earlier. If Trump wins or if Kamala wins, what's going to be the response of the, quote, losing side?
Okay, what I find with the losing side is, if you remember during the Black Lives Matter time, that was to gauge the temperature. And they turned the streets over to the liberals, if you remember, and gave them Summer of Love and this and that, which they wound up destroying. But in that, what we learned was, if you remember the police precincts, did they go out and fight? Mm-mm. They shut up and went home. Do you remember the precincts that shut up?
Yes.
Okay, so that was their thermostat, I think, for the left to learn. And what it shows me is that across this country, they have very successfully destroyed our communities at the mayoral level. And therefore, when any type of conflict is going to come, it is going to escalate. Can I say which side is this? I would think, from what I've watched, the liberals run on emotion. And I would think that if Trump wins, we're going to have a lot of Americans that are elated.
Yeah.
So
you're just so right. But I mean, you think about what happened in Minneapolis. Talk about Black Lives
Yes.
Matter. They destroyed black businesses, destroyed
yes.
CVS's or whatever that will never reopen in those communities.
Yeah, but look.
So they really hurt the people. And when they tried to protest in Miami, what did DeSantis do in
Lock 'em
Florida?
up.
He shut them down. He got them
Right.
out of the street. You're breaking our laws. And he rounded them up, put them away, and they stopped.
Well, how about
And-
with the American flag? They just did in Washington and took the American flag
Right.
down and put the Palestinian.
Right, and then
was there any
and then
repercussion to correct that?
Exactly. In University of North Carolina, the young men fought back and said, the fraternity came out and said, we're not going to allow this.
Right.
We're going to stop it. And that's what it's going to take.
Exactly.
We've got to say enough is enough. We're going to protect our freedom. If you want to destroy San Francisco, I mean, look at what even your governor in California is doing. Now all of a sudden he's cleaning up
All
the
of a
streets
sudden, you see that?
because he knows an election's coming, and he didn't want them showing that the California how bad it is. They want to shut it down, and they're doing it like they cleaned up when Xi from China came over to San Francisco.
Yes.
They cleaned up the streets. All of a sudden it was clean and made it the city it should
For the
be.
photographs.
So anyway, what's your point on that? What do you think?
Well, you got to go deeper with Gavin because they keep yelling and screaming that the Supreme Court is always going to go conservative. And Gavin Newsom is using a Supreme Court ruling during the last session that enables cities to enforce ordinances that they had to take homeless off the street. Now, he's claiming that's why I never did it, you know, but for real, he did do it. You know, from a Democratic Republican standpoint, I think we saw, as you were saying, we saw a little insight from it when during the I want to call them riots. They weren't protests. I mean,
Right.
they crawled on statues and ripped
Correct.
down flags. We have such a separation of feelings when it comes to the Jewish community, Israel, and whatnot. So if the Republicans were to win, typically the Republican or conservative side does stay closer to and stands with Israel.
That's a key point. I'll bless
if,
those that bless you. I'll curse
Yep.
those that curse you.
And with the Democratic side of things, where it's convenient, they say we stand with
Right.
Israel. And I would believe that would we have an all out and out situation, I think there will be some cities that should the Republicans take the White House, I think they're going to use that as a reasoning because you're not going to protect the people of Palestine. Unfortunately, we know who started that situation. There was a ceasefire in place when this whole matter started, but they don't want to accept it. So we've seen through the educational process over the last 10 or 15 years the mindset of young men and women who have come out of college who have been educated by people who are far left, who and it's terrible. I mean, what they've done to it. Their mindset is if we don't get what we want, guess what we're going to do? We're going to riot on the streets. We're going to tear down our campuses. We're not going to allow certain people to come on to the campuses. And I think we could potentially see, and I hope not. I hope people will be reasonable about it. Well, we lost. Maybe next time. I don't see that. I think
don't either.
from on the right-hand side, I think they'd be going. You'll see a push toward voter integrity. You'll see, each side is going to have their own battles. Right. But I think from a velocity side of things, I guess you might want to say, I think it would come more from the left than it would be.
Well, we see that all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, quick, we only have about a minute and a half left.
Yeah.
Give us a quick 30-second of why someone should come to TNS.
If you want to hear information that you're not hearing otherwise, if you want the facts, if you want the information, and you don't want propaganda, you can come to the Newscaster studio and you will get it. There will be someone that will talk to the subject matter of what you're interested in, and you will get the facts. As I said earlier, you may not like that information, but you're going to get the facts. Absolutely. And you have to deal with it.
I'm going to ask Victoria. We got about a minute left.
And
real quick.
And actually, too, I wanted to let the audience know that there are so many great writers out there. Our insights are our blogs, and we welcome. So if somebody doesn't want to be on a show or doesn't want to do radio or video, you can write, and we put that. We have a place for your voice. So we try to give a video voice, an audio voice, and try to spread as much as we can to bring people together, to unite voices.
Amen. That is so good. Well, you got the Newscaster studio and you got WCGA. Great apps to listen to incredible programming. And I want to encourage everybody out there. I'd like to thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Murray, for being here. Thank you, Good Day Friends, for being here. I want to thank you for all you're doing to listen to Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day on WCGA 1100 from St. Simon's Island, Georgia. And remember, every day is a God day.